The room was silent except for the low hum of fluorescent lights. Captain Emily Carter stood at the center of the operations briefing room, eyes scanning the digital map projected onto the wall. Red dots marked enemy positions, while blue represented her team's intended approach. It wasn't her first mission, but tonight felt different. Tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to strike. "Emily, you understand the stakes," Colonel Harris said, his voice clipped and heavy. "This mission is deep behind enemy lines. If you fail, the intel is gone, and with it, countless lives." Emily nodded, her jaw tight. She didn't need him to tell her the stakes. She had trained for scenarios like this for years, but training wasn't reality. The terrain, the enemy unpredictability, the unknown variables, they were all factors she had to control, and control wasn't guaranteed. She adjusted the straps on her tactical vest, feeling the familiar weight of her gears settle across her shoulders. Every pocket, every holster, every strap had a purpose. Her rifle was carefully cleaned, her sidearm loaded, and a small medkit tucked securely at her waist. She ran through her mental checklist one last time. Stealth, speed, precision. No mistakes. Outside the briefing room, the wind whipped across the base, carrying with it the scent of dust and oil. The mission would take her hundreds of miles into hostile territory, a region controlled by an enemy force, trained, ruthless, and aware that any intruders would not leave alive. But Emily didn't flinch. Fear wasn't part of her vocabulary. It was caution, focus, and strategy that guided her. A young sergeant entered with a tablet. "All systems are green. Helicopter ETA 5 minutes." Emily took a deep breath. She allowed herself a brief moment to think of home, a small apartment back in the States, the echo of her younger brother's laugh, the voice of her mother reminding her to eat before she left. She pushed those thoughts aside. Now wasn't the time for sentimentality. Now was the time for precision. Her team gathered quietly, a tight-knit unit of 4, including Emily. Each member was highly trained, skilled in covert operations, and loyal to the last heartbeat. They exchanged brief nods, no need for words. Trust in this line of work was built silently, through shared missions and mutual respect. The helicopter arrived with a roar, its blades cutting through the night like a predator slicing through shadows. Emily climbed aboard, her movements practiced, precise. As the door closed behind her, she felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. The mission was no longer theoretical. It was now. The ride was tense. The only sounds were the mechanical heartbeat of the rotor blades and the quiet murmurs of her teammates reviewing last-minute intel. Emily's eyes scanned the landscape below. She could see the faint glint of patrol lights, the silhouette of distant mountains, and the dark stretches of desert that would be their path. Every movement, every shadow could conceal danger. Her mind raced through possible contingencies. What if they were spotted? What if the extraction point was compromised? What if the intel was already in enemy hands? Each scenario had a response. Each response had a price. Suddenly, the pilot's voice cut through her thoughts. "Approaching LZ. Expect heavy resistance." Emily's pulse quickened, though her face remained calm. She tightened her grip on her rifle. Her eyes met each teammate's, silent acknowledgement of what was coming. No words could capture the gravity of the moment. They were about to enter a world where mistakes were fatal, and survival depended on skill, instinct, and sheer willpower. The helicopter descended, cutting through the chill of night air. Dust swirled around them as the landing zone neared. Emily adjusted her helmet, checked her sidearm, and focused on the target location. The moment their boots touched the ground, the real mission would begin. As the helicopter skidded to a halt, Emily's thoughts flickered briefly to her brother stationed overseas in a different sector. She had promised him she would come back alive. She didn't know if she would, but she wasn't about to fail him or herself. Every step she took from that moment on would be deliberate, calculated, and deadly if necessary. The team moved out in formation, silent shadows moving against the desert terrain. Emily led, scanning the environment, noting every possible vantage point the enemy could exploit. Each step forward was measured. The air was thick with tension, every sound amplified: rustling sand, distant machinery, the hum of a night drone overhead. A flicker of movement caught Emily's eye. She froze, signaling the team to halt. Her heart didn't race, but her senses heightened. A patrol, moving faster than expected, crossed their path. Emily counted them silently. 4. Well armed. They hadn't seen her yet. "Take positions," Emily whispered. The team fanned out, using the terrain for cover. Her rifle was steady, her breathing controlled. One misstep, one premature shot, and the mission could end before it began. The patrol passed just beyond the shadows. Emily exhaled slowly. Her team moved again, cautiously, like ghosts in the night. Every movement was a dance with death, choreographed in silence and instinct. Suddenly, in the distance, a faint explosion lit up the horizon. The team stopped. Emily's eyes narrowed. Something was wrong, something big. This wasn't part of the intel. Her instincts screamed at her. Danger wasn't just coming, it was here. And she knew, without a doubt, that tonight the mission would test her in ways no training ever could. Emily signaled the team to proceed. "Stay sharp. Every step matters," she said quietly, her voice a whisper that carried the weight of command. The desert night stretched ahead, dark and unrelenting. Somewhere in that darkness, enemies waited. Somewhere in that darkness, Emily Carter would face the unknown and survive or die trying. As they approached the first checkpoint, a shadow shifted in the distance. Emily's eyes locked onto it. Something about it didn't feel right. The calm before the storm had passed. The mission that could change everything had begun, and the real danger was only just emerging. The night air was thick with tension as Emily and her team moved deeper into enemy territory. Every step was deliberate, every shadow a potential threat. Her eyes scanned the barren desert landscape, noting every ridge, every shadow, and the glint of distant patrol lights. The mission was supposed to be simple: infiltrate, gather intel, exfiltrate. But as Emily's instincts warned her, simple rarely stayed simple in war zones. Ahead, the faint hum of machinery signaled the enemy's presence, a forward operating post bristling with armed guards. Emily signaled her team to halt and crouched low behind a dune. Her pulse was steady, but her mind raced through contingencies. She had planned for enemy patrols, sniper posts, and surveillance drones, but she hadn't accounted for what was about to happen next. A sudden flash of light, a spotlight, sliced across the sand. Emily froze. The patrol had spotted movement. Without hesitation, her team engaged in a flurry of silent hand signals, moving into defensive positions. Gunfire erupted as the enemy opened up, and the night exploded with chaos. Emily's training took over. She ducked behind cover, calculated the enemy's firing angles, and returned precise bursts of fire. Her team executed coordinated maneuvers, but the ambush was larger than anticipated. Explosions ripped through the surrounding terrain, sending plumes of sand and smoke into the night sky. "Fall back!" Emily shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The team tried to regroup, but panic had begun to set in. In the blink of an eye, she was separated from them. A sudden grenade blast sent her tumbling into a shallow ravine. Sand filled her mouth, dust burned her eyes, and the echoes of gunfire seemed to reverberate inside her skull. For a moment, everything was still. Emily crawled to her feet, disoriented but alive. She scanned the battlefield. Her teammates were nowhere in sight. The enemy had surrounded the area, patrolling systematically. She was alone. A shiver ran down her spine, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Emily knew the reality of her situation: isolated, deep behind enemy lines, with no immediate support. Every decision from this point forward would determine whether she lived or became just another casualty in a war that didn't care about heroes. Emily moved silently, hugging the shadows. Every step was calculated, measured. She avoided open areas, using the dunes, rocks, and abandoned structures for cover. The night was a labyrinth of danger, and the enemy's patrols were methodical, scanning every corner, every crevice. She had to stay ahead. One mistake could cost her everything. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed distorted in the chaos of survival. Emily crouched behind a crumbling wall, catching her breath and assessing her situation. She had to find a way out. The mission, the intel, her life, all depended on it. As she moved, she noticed a faint glow from a nearby communication tower. Enemy signals were being transmitted. She could intercept them, turn their own technology against them. But it was risky. Any misstep, and she would be detected immediately. With careful precision, Emily climbed the tower, her muscles straining with each movement. Her fingers gripped rusted metal beams, eyes scanning for threats below. She reached the top, her heart pounding, and connected a small device to intercept enemy communications. Her ears filled with static, then voices, commands, locations, and movements of enemy units. She memorized everything she could. Knowledge was her weapon now, more lethal than bullets in this situation. Descending the tower, Emily felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. The intel gave her options, but the danger was far from over. Every patrol now carried the potential to detect her. Every shadow could conceal a sniper. Every heartbeat could be her last. She ducked into an abandoned building, the walls pockmarked with bullet holes, floors covered in sand and debris. The building offered temporary shelter, a chance to regroup. She allowed herself a brief moment to assess her wounds, a scrape on her arm, a bruise on her side, but nothing life-threatening. Her body was sore, her mind alert, her spirit unbroken. Emily pressed a small, crumpled photograph into her palm, a picture of her younger brother smiling. She had promised to return. That promise fueled her resolve. Fear was there, lurking at the edges, but it was controlled. Controlled fear sharpened her instincts. Uncontrolled fear would kill her. The night was far from over. She listened as distant gunfire faded and then returned, a constant reminder that the battlefield was alive. Emily knew she had to move before dawn. She studied the terrain from her makeshift hiding spot. A river of sand stretched before her, broken by clusters of rocks and the occasional ruined structure. The enemy's patrols crisscrossed the area, predictable yet dangerous. Emily decided to move. She slipped from the building, low and silent, using the shadows to her advantage. She avoided open areas with uncanny precision, her every movement deliberate. At one point, a soldier stepped directly into her path. Emily froze, holding her breath, and waited. The soldier scanned the area, then moved on. Emily exhaled silently. One near miss, one small victory. As dawn approached, the desert sky turned from black to a muted gray. Emily emerged from the outskirts of a small compound. She crouched behind a pile of rubble, observing enemy activity. The compound seemed lightly guarded, but it held the exit route she needed. Crossing it would require timing, stealth, and courage. She mentally rehearsed her path, calculating the distance, the enemy positions, and the timing of patrols. Suddenly, movement from above, a drone hovering silently, scanning the ground. Emily's heart skipped. She flattened herself against the rubble, barely daring to breathe. The drone moved on, oblivious to her presence. Relief washed over her, but it was fleeting. Every moment was a test of her nerve, her skill, her ability to survive. Hours blurred into one long, tense stretch. Emily's mind focused on survival. Evade, adapt, outthink. She moved across the compound's perimeter, using every bit of cover, avoiding detection, and silently taking note of exit points. She found a drainage tunnel, partially hidden by sand and debris, a potential escape route. Before entering, she paused. The sounds of distant gunfire, the hum of machinery, the occasional shout, all reminded her of the stakes. She adjusted her gear, checked her weapons, and whispered to herself, "Not today. I'm not done yet." Emily entered the tunnel, disappearing into darkness. Every step echoed softly, a rhythmic reminder of her isolation, but she pressed forward, fueled by determination, intelligence, and sheer willpower. Alone, behind enemy lines, and facing impossible odds, Emily Carter was not defeated. She was surviving, and she was learning. The night had tested her, the mission had gone wrong, her team was scattered, and the enemy was everywhere. But Emily survived. And in the shadows, planning her next move, she realized something vital. She wasn't just running from danger, she was preparing to turn it against the enemy. The desert dawn broke over the horizon, painting the landscape in muted oranges and golds. Emily emerged from the tunnel, cautious but resolute. The real test of survival had just begun, and she was ready. The desert sun rose high, casting harsh, unforgiving light over the barren landscape. Emily Carter moved cautiously, her body low, every step deliberate. The dust clung to her fatigues, her face streaked with dirt and sweat, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the terrain for threats. She was alone, behind enemy lines, and every heartbeat was a reminder. One mistake could cost her life. The tunnel she had escaped into during the night ended abruptly, leaving her in a small, dry wadi littered with jagged rocks. Enemy patrols crisscrossed the open sand dunes nearby, and surveillance drones hovered intermittently above, their mechanical eyes sweeping for any signs of intrusion. Emily knew that moving in the open would be suicide. She had to adapt. Crouching behind a jagged boulder, she retrieved a compact multi-tool from her belt and began to modify a small portable device she had scavenged from her equipment pack, a signal jammer. It wasn't perfect, but it could buy her critical minutes if an enemy drone scanned too close. Every second she spent preparing was a gamble. Every second she hesitated could expose her. Her mind replayed the events of the night before, the ambush, the explosions, the chaos, and the deafening realization of being alone. Her team was scattered, possibly dead, and she had no way to contact them. But she refused to despair. Fear was a tool she wielded, not a chain she carried. Survival demanded focus, and Emily's focus was absolute. Hours passed in tense, silent movement. She navigated the rocky landscape with precision, crawling under shadows, rolling across sand dunes, and using debris as cover. Her senses were on high alert. A lone patrol emerged from the horizon, armed, disciplined, and scanning the terrain. Emily froze, barely daring to breathe, and waited. The patrol moved past her hiding spot, their footsteps crunching against the sand. One soldier paused, cocking his head as if sensing something, but eventually they continued on their path. Emily exhaled silently, her muscles relaxing just enough to ease the tension. One mistake had been avoided. She had survived another encounter. By midday, Emily found temporary shelter in the ruins of an abandoned watchtower. From her vantage point, she observed enemy movements, memorizing patrol patterns, positions of sentries, and supply routes. She documented everything in her mind. Information was her weapon now. Knowing the enemy's layout could allow her to strike, evade, or escape. Inside the watchtower, she treated her minor injuries, a deep scrape on her arm, a bruise along her ribs. Blood and sweat streaked her skin, but she worked quickly, using a small medkit to clean and bandage the wounds. Pain was present, but it was manageable. Her body was a tool, and she treated it with the precision of a surgeon. Night approached, and Emily knew she had to act. Staying put until morning would increase the risk of detection. She retrieved her rifle and sidearm, carefully inspecting them, checking ammunition, and preparing for stealth maneuvers. She moved through the ruins, her shadow elongated in the moonlight, ghost-like and deliberate. In the distance, she noticed a small communications outpost, lightly guarded and seemingly isolated. This could be her chance. If she could intercept the enemy transmissions, she could gain critical intel and potentially turn their own operations against them. But the approach was perilous. One misstep and she would be exposed. Emily advanced silently, hugging shadows, her breathing controlled, her body attuned to the environment. She reached the perimeter of the outpost and surveyed it carefully. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, while another monitored a radar screen inside a small building. Timing would be everything. She waited, studying their movements. When the guards' backs were turned, she slipped forward, a shadow moving across the moonlit sand. She disabled one sentry with a precise blow, muffled by the soft sand beneath them. The second guard was unaware, moving along the opposite side. Emily's heart raced, but her hands were steady. In a swift, calculated move, she neutralized the second guard, her training flawless under pressure. Inside the building, Emily connected her small device to the enemy's communication system. Static filled her ears, then voices, commands, supply requests, patrol schedules. Every piece of information was vital. She memorized it all, her mind a steel trap. For the first time since the mission went wrong, Emily felt a spark of hope. Knowledge was power, and tonight she wielded it like a blade. Suddenly, a noise behind her, footsteps, hurried, approaching. Emily pivoted, heart racing. A soldier had discovered the first sentry. Time was short. She ducked behind the console, holding her breath as the soldier entered. He froze, sensing something was off. Emily waited, calculating, then triggered a small distraction, a brief explosion she had rigged moments earlier. The soldier was drawn away, and she seized the opportunity to escape. Back outside, Emily moved with renewed purpose. The intel she had captured gave her options. She could plan a route to exfiltration or set traps for the enemy. But she had learned a crucial lesson. Survival required patience, observation, and adaptability. Every step, every action, every decision could mean life or death. Hours passed. She navigated through a series of rocky gullies, avoiding patrols, scanning for drones, and using every trick in her arsenal. Exhaustion pressed against her body. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but her determination never wavered. She had a mission, and she had a promise: to survive and return home. Emily paused atop a ridge, surveying the desert below. The sun had dipped, casting long shadows over the dunes. Somewhere out there, the enemy was organizing, reacting to her presence, unaware of the extent of her maneuvers. Emily's mind worked tirelessly, planning her next move, calculating risks, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. She had survived ambush, separation, and relentless pursuit. She had intercepted critical intel, outmaneuvered enemy patrols, and adapted to a hostile environment that would have broken a lesser soldier. Her body was weary, but her mind was sharper than ever. Emily Carter was more than a survivor. She was becoming a strategist, a force to be reckoned with, and a phantom the enemy could not predict. The night deepened, and Emily found temporary refuge in a ruined bunker. She allowed herself a brief rest, her body curled against cold concrete, but her mind remained alert. Every sound, the rustle of sand, the hum of distant machinery, the faint murmur of enemy voices, kept her on edge. Sleep was a luxury she could not afford fully, yet her body demanded it. As she rested, she reviewed the intel in her mind, memorizing patrol patterns, supply routes, and vulnerabilities. Tomorrow she would move again, pushing closer to the extraction point. The enemy thought she had her trapped. They thought she was isolated and vulnerable, but Emily Carter had learned to turn fear into focus, danger into strategy, and isolation into opportunity. In the darkness, she whispered to herself, a vow and a reminder: I survive, I fight, I come back alive. The words were a mantra, a lifeline, and a declaration of resilience. The mission had gone wrong, but she had not. And as the first faint light of dawn crept into the desert sky, Emily prepared for the next phase of her ordeal, the one that would test her limits even further. The night behind enemy lines had forged her into something stronger, sharper, and more determined. She was no longer just a soldier following orders. She was a survivor, a strategist, a warrior, and she was ready for what came next. The first rays of dawn painted the desert in muted gold and crimson. Emily Carter crouched behind a jagged boulder, the night's adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Her body was exhausted, every muscle screaming for rest, but her mind was sharp. She had survived ambushes, separation, and relentless enemy patrols. Now it was time to escape and live to see home again. The intel she had stolen the night before provided a narrow window. Enemy reinforcements were reorganizing, distracted by a diversion she had cleverly staged earlier. It was her chance. Emily checked her weapons, rifle ready, sidearm loaded, a small combat knife strapped to her thigh, and assessed the terrain. Every ridge, every dune, every shadow was a potential ally or threat. She moved silently, ghost-like, across the desert floor. Her training allowed her to read the landscape as if it were a map etched into her mind. She avoided open areas, slipped past enemy patrols, and timed her movements with precision. Every step carried the weight of life and death. Ahead, a patrol crossed her path unexpectedly. Emily flattened herself against the sand, barely daring to breathe. The soldiers walked within meters of her hiding spot, oblivious to the shadow that crouched, watching, calculating. One soldier paused, scanning the dunes, but Emily's heart remained calm. She had learned to control fear, to use it as a tool. The patrol moved on, leaving her unharmed. A small victory, but crucial. As she approached a ruined compound that marked the halfway point to extraction, Emily noticed enemy reinforcements moving toward her path. Their numbers had grown. Her exit route was compromised. A decision had to be made: retreat and risk exposure, or improvise a bold diversion. Emily's mind raced, weighing risk against necessity. She scanned the compound. Among the ruins, she spotted flammable barrels, strategically positioned near the enemy's supply crates. A calculated risk. Emily ignited a small flare, sending a spark into the barrels. Flames erupted, smoke curling into the sky. The explosion was controlled but convincing, enough to draw attention away from her path. The enemy scrambled, shouting orders, trying to contain the chaos. Emily moved, her silhouette blending with shadows, every movement silent and deliberate. She sprinted across the compound, narrowly avoiding patrols distracted by the fire. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but her determination was unyielding. Every step brought her closer to survival, closer to the extraction point. A sudden shout pierced the air. A guard had spotted her. Emily rolled behind a crumbling wall, firing precise shots to disable a pursuing soldier. Her combat training was flawless, but fatigue gnawed at her. Adrenaline kept her moving, sharpened her senses, and focused her mind on one objective: survival. The extraction point was now in sight, a small clearing near a ridge where a stealth helicopter was scheduled to arrive. But the enemy was closing in. Emily's mind raced. She needed a final diversion to ensure she could reach the landing zone. She scanned her surroundings and spotted an old fuel depot. One precise shot, one calculated fire, and the enemy's attention would be diverted once more. Emily fired. Flames erupted, engulfing the depot in a roaring blaze. Enemy soldiers diverted their focus, and she seized the opportunity. Sprinting with every ounce of strength left, she crossed the final stretch of open sand. Bullets kicked up around her, some whistling dangerously close, but she pressed forward, every movement fueled by sheer willpower. The helicopter's blades whirred in the distance, a mechanical heartbeat signaling hope. Emily waved, signaling her extraction team. The rotor wash kicked up clouds of sand, blurring the horizon, but she didn't falter. Step by step, she closed the distance. Suddenly, a sniper shot rang out. Emily dove forward, rolling into cover behind a ridge. pain seared her shoulder, a grazing wound, but she ignored it, pressing on. Every instinct, every training module, every lesson learned in years of combat converged into this moment. She was alive. She was unstoppable. With a final burst of speed, Emily reached the clearing. The helicopter lowered its ramp, and she sprinted aboard, sliding onto the deck just as the enemy opened fire on the sand below. The pilot accelerated, lifting the aircraft into the air. Emily collapsed onto the floor, her body trembling with exhaustion, relief, and adrenaline. She had survived against impossible odds. As the desert receded beneath them, Emily allowed herself a moment to breathe, to reflect. She had been alone, isolated, and hunted, but she had not failed. Her strategic thinking, her resilience, and her sheer determination had carried her through. She had survived the mission that went wrong and had come back alive. Back at the base, Emily was met with tense silence. Her team, having survived scattered encounters in other parts of the operation, regrouped and watched as Emily stepped off the helicopter. Bloodied, battered, but unbroken, she stood tall, her eyes scanning familiar faces, colleagues who had waited, worried, and prayed for her return. Colonel Harris approached, his expression unreadable. "Colonel Carter," he said, his voice low but tinged with respect, "I thought we'd lost you." Emily allowed herself a small smile. "Not today, sir," she replied, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. She had kept her promise, to herself, to her team, and to her brother waiting far away. Medics approached, tending to her wounds, but Emily hardly noticed. Her mind replayed the night's events, the ambush, the drone surveillance, the fire, the calculated maneuvers, and the courage it took to act alone. She had transformed from a skilled soldier into a tactical ghost, a strategist capable of turning the enemy's strengths into weaknesses. As Emily walked through the base, her boots crunching on the gravel, she noticed the sunrise breaking over the horizon. Lights spilling over the mountains, painting the sky in gold and crimson, symbolized not just the end of a night of terror, but a new day, a return to life, to hope, to purpose. She returned to her quarters, stripped down, cleaned herself, and allowed a brief moment to reflect. A survivor's fatigue weighed on her body, but her mind was sharp. She had faced death, isolation, and chaos, and emerged victorious. Emily Carter wasn't just a soldier, she was a survivor, a hero forged in fire, and a testament to courage and resilience. Later, in the briefing room, she received a new mission. A new challenge awaited, another operation where lives depended on precision and bravery. She looked at the map, the red dots of danger still scattered across the terrain, and allowed herself a small, determined smile. She would face it. She would survive again. She had done it once, and she would do it again. The story of Emily Carter spread quietly through the ranks. A secret mission gone wrong, a soldier left behind, yet a single woman who survived against all odds. She became a legend in whispers, a name synonymous with resilience, courage, and unyielding spirit. And as she gazed at the horizon from the base, Emily whispered quietly to herself, a vow, a promise, and a declaration. No matter what comes next, I survive, I fight, I come back alive. The desert was behind her. The danger still existed somewhere, but Emily Carter had returned. She had lived, she had triumphed, and the world, though unaware of every detail, had witnessed the indomitable spirit of a female soldier who refused to be broken.